Ah, that's them told you. Ha! Now, in our third week, we took a look at American news commentators who were mad people, basically, like this. The fair and balanced opinion slingers of dystopian future sci-fi satirical shouty porn sledgehammer channel Fox News are the craziest people you ever did see. Fox generally leans more to the right than a man who's just had his right leg blown off, and now Obama's in the White House, their commentators are getting to play the underdog at last.
If you believe this country is great, but nobody is fighting for you, let me tell you something. You don't need any guns for this revolution. You just need to stand up and find your voice. Come on, follow me.
Well, there's a curious kind of underdoggery where they complain about liberal bias in the media one moment and then brag about their cable dominance the next. Now, to a dumb foreigner like me, all the Fox anchors look like characters in some 80s frat house comedy.
Oh, wait, dear.
For instance, Sean Hannity here would be cast as the uptight jock bully. Witness his cold ink-dot eyes, which could have been surgically transplanted from a particularly characterless dormouse, and his whiny, peevish demeanour.
We can't say enemy combatant, we can't say terrorist. We'll get to those things in a second. Now we're not going to use the term illegal immigrant?
The disapproving high school principal would have to be Bill O'Reilly, moralising about permissive society one minute.
The Woodstock generation thought it was cool to get stoned.
And chortling about lady bumps the next.
Their pitch is beach-friendly, if you know what I mean, and we believe they are patriots.
When there's no tits to dribble over, Bill kills time by boasting about his ratings.
Judging from our enormous ratings, I think we've been successful in doing that.
Or plugging his myriad books.
I do want to thank you all for keeping Bold fresh on the bestseller list for more than 6 months.
Or simply sitting there pulling a face like a tortoise that's learned to enjoy the stink of its own farts. But his primary characteristic is anger. Bill gets wound up by virtually anything to the left of Mussolini, hectoring and yowling like a wolf that's got his nuts caught on a coat hanger.
See, I'm more angry about it than you are.
So what about George Bush?
What about George Bush? You had nothing to do with it.
Still, if you think Bill O'Reilly's outrageous, you haven't seen anything yet. This is recent Fox signing Glenn Beck, who at first glance looks like a welcoming, happy kind of chap. He effectively presents his commentary show in the style of a wacky neighbour from a bad sitcom. Although, actually, rather than a sitcom, this is more like an out-and-out variety show, replete with zany chuckles.
You think that ain't gonna happen?
Table-thumping conservative rhetoric.
I think this makes a good case to shoot people on the battlefield. Well, you got these guys. We can't keep them in prison because they're not technically terrorists, but they were in terrorist training camps. Were they fighting against us?
Well, they were in a terrorist training camp.
Yeah, I mean, we go in, you shoot them then.
And toe-tapping patriotic country music.
When I see people on my TV taking shots at Uncle Sam, I hope they always remember why they can. Because we'd all be speaking German or living under the flag of Japan if it wasn't for the good Lord and the man.
Anyway, so far you're probably thinking, okay, it's extremely right-wing, but it's fairly sane. Yes, because Beck isn't just a face of news, he's a bona fide social crusader who started his own post-apocalyptic sounding 9/12 project aimed at bringing the nation together in a spirit of unity and hope and something and stuff.
This is the 9/12 Project.
Are you ready to be that person that you were that day after 9/11 on 9/12? I told you for weeks, you're not alone.
Now, I don't know if you've seen the superb and prophetic movie Network, in which Peter Finch played a news anchor who loses his mind and becomes a ranting, raving, rating smash after sinister bosses leave him on air.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not gonna take this anymore!
This is basically like that, but crazier, and starring Paul Giamatti in a blonde wig.
The real power to change America's course still resides with you. You are the secret. You're the answer. I'm sorry. I just love my country, and I fear for it. And it seems like the voices of our leaders and special interests and the media, they're surrounding us. It sounds intimidating.
Or mental.
The truth is, they don't surround us. We surround them. This is our country.
And now the weather from a talking oven glove with a face on it. Hello.
Yeah, Glenn Beck might cry on air, but does he appear in a neck brace laughing nihilistically at all the torment in the world like this? Ha 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 ha! No. Anyway, the recession, or money-geddon as we like to call it, has remained top of the news agenda all the time we've been on air. It's involved a lot of tricky concepts the news has had to try and explain to us. Here's how they dealt with quantitative easing.
Every day there's been baffling new terminology to learn, with the latest being quantitative easing, the Bank of England's recent attempt to stop the economy tumbling into a great big bin full of bums. Now, unless you speak fluent jargon, it's not immediately clear what quantitative easing actually is.
In fact, as Newsnight found out when they hit the streets to ask human beings, even Brainiac Moss from the IT crowd doesn't know what it is.
The easing of quantitativeness.
Thank God then that the news is on hand to describe exactly what quantitative easing is in easy-to-follow metaphorical steps.
Put simply, quantitative easing is a tool for fixing a blockage in an economy that isn't running smoothly.
There you go, it's a sort of spanner, made of money.
But how does it work?
Well, I suppose you twist it into the stock market.
It's like creating money out of thin air or filling up a petrol tank with imaginary petrol. That is what most economists agree is needed to get any recovery started.
Oh God, he isn't making any sense. What I need is someone who can't help but speak in profoundly simple terms.
Hello, welcome to 5 News. I'm Natasha Kaplinsky.
I'm preemptively chuckling because I reckon she's about to tell us it's designed to encourage the banks and arse to get lending and spending.
It is designed to encourage the banks and us to get lending and spending. Our chief correspondent Jonathan Samuels investigates whether these measures will help an economy that's been going off the rails.
Why, Natasha, that almost sounds like a cue for a bad railway metaphor.
The economy at the moment seems to be like a runaway train.
Great, all right, let's see you run with this one.
The government's been pulling lots of levers behind the scenes to try and slow down the economic crisis, but it's got to such a stage now that they're trying a different track.
Just tell me how it works.
It's called quantitative easing. The idea is to pump more money into the economy and get banks lending again.
Toot toot, the economy's made of trains.
We once had a model economy. The government hopes the latest measures will mean we soon see light at the end of the tunnel.
Now, far be it from me to want to fart in your sleeping bag or anything, but statistically speaking, it's quite likely that some of you watching the programme this evening will at some point in your lives die. But famous people die too, if that's any consolation, and the news doesn't always know how to cope with it when that happens. Here's an excerpt from a piece we did on the death of Jade Goody. The coverage of Jade Goody's death was hardly about death or Jade at all. Instead, it was about the news media having a collective self-perpetuating bun fight. Take the tabloid papers, which, having hurled buckets of misogynist abuse or eye-swivelling rage over Jade for years, suddenly had to perform a U-turn so huge it was visible from space and start gushing with cliched tabloid speak about inspiring bravery.
It was almost as though the press felt guilty for treating her badly in the past, although of course the press doesn't feel anything, it just wants to sell more papers.
That's why they willingly put her on the front cover as often as possible, veering into astronomical bad taste in a way that would simply alarm other cancer sufferers.
And when they didn't have a photo, they simply made one up.
Take this astonishing Daily Star front page from the 18th of February, which, as Private Eye pointed out, is actually a photoshopped version of this more jubilant photograph taken a year ago when Jade still had hair.
It's amazing to think somebody actually did that. Somebody actually sat there, spending hours photoshopping out that hair, giving Jade retrospective cancer to sell their paper. And to think the press has the temerity to moan whenever TV gets accused of faking things. What twats!
Speaking of things that want photoshopping, look at Peter Cushing here, aka Carol Malone.
Here's someone who had to change her tune quicker than an iPod shuffle.
Having berated Jade for 200 years in her shit and nasty newspaper columns, suddenly she was conducting sympathetic interviews with her before taking to the newsstands on March the 8th to say it was time to turn the cameras off Jade, asking, is it just me who's starting to feel like the spectre at the feast?
Although I think she meant look, not feel.
Luckily for Carol, before they turned the cameras off, she had time to appear in a mawkish ITV Tonight special the very next night.
She made headlines without thinking, and she was perfect.
Of course, the tabloids weren't the only ones jammed full of Jade. No, the self-appointed quality press got in on the act too. They ran plenty of chin-stroking, oh, what does it all mean pieces on the cultural meaning of Jade's suffering. There was a lot of woe-betided intellectual masturbation, which sometimes veered over into outright snobbery, such as in Rod Little's bizarre, venomous article for The Spectator. You know, I've tried to think of something clever to say about Rod Little, but he just comes across as a